The morning was too quiet, the kind of stillness that makes even the wind hold its breath. I was trimming the rosebush near the porch when I saw Sloane's silver SUV crawl down the gravel road toward the lake. She didn't belong there this early. Something in her posture, stiff, mechanical, made my stomach twist. I followed at a distance, half hidden behind the trees. She stepped out, heels sinking into the damp earth, and opened the trunk. A large brown suitcase sat inside. Without hesitation, she dragged it to the edge of Lake Juniper. The water was gray, restless under the dawn light. Then she did something I'll never forget. She lifted the suitcase and threw it, hard, into the lake. The splash shattered the silence. Ripples widened, slow and sinister, until they swallowed everything. Sloane stood there for a second, watching the suitcase sink. Then she turned, brushed her hands against her skirt, and walked back to the car. No hesitation. No fear. No glance back. I couldn't move. My mind refused to make sense of what I'd seen. And then, as her SUV disappeared around the bend, instinct took over. I ran. Mud sucked at my shoes. The cold bit through my skin as I waded into the water, heart hammering in my throat. The suitcase was half submerged, spinning gently. I grabbed the handle, nearly lost my footing, but pulled until it scraped against the shore. It was heavy, bloated with water. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the zipper. It was jammed, rusted from dampness. I yanked once, twice. It gave way with a tearing sound. The smell hit me first. Metal, mud, and something faintly sweet. Inside, wrapped in a soaked powder blue blanket, was a baby. So tiny. So still. For a moment, the world stopped. My mind screamed, "No, no, no," but my body moved on its own. I tore the blanket open. The baby's lips were blue. Then, a faint whimper. Barely there, but real. "Hold on," I whispered, scooping him up. His skin was ice against my chest. I stumbled toward the shore, clutching him close, pressing warmth into his fragile body. My fingers fumbled with my phone. 911, I gasped. "Please, send help. There's a baby. I found a baby in the lake." The dispatcher's voice blurred. All I could hear was the weak, uneven breath against my heart, the smallest sound, but enough to shatter the silence forever. Sirens tore through the morning stillness as the ambulance skidded to a stop beside me. My clothes clung, dripping with lake water, and the baby's tiny body was a pale bundle against my chest. A paramedic rushed forward, voice firm but kind. "Ma'am, give him to me. We've got him." I didn't want to let go. His fragile warmth was the only proof he was still alive. But my hands were shaking too hard, and when they lifted him, I felt the weight of terror settle in my bones. Inside the ambulance, everything moved too fast. The doors slammed shut. The sirens screamed. The world outside blurred into streaks of color. One paramedic pressed a tiny oxygen mask over the baby's face while another took his pulse. "Heart rate's low," she muttered. "We've got bradycardia." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He's fighting," she said without looking up. "We'll do everything we can." I clutched the edge of the gurney, praying, whispering Marcus's name under my breath. My son would have known what to do, he always did. But Marcus was gone, and all I could do was beg whatever force was listening not to take this child too. When we reached the hospital, the baby vanished behind swinging doors. Nurses shouted orders, machines beeped, and I stood there useless, soaked to the skin. A woman in scrubs guided me to a bench. "You saved his life," she said softly, pressing a blanket around my shoulders. "Now let us save the rest." Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before a woman approached in a blazer and badge. "I'm Detective Ava Morales," she said. "Can you tell me what happened?" I told her everything. The car, the suitcase, the splash, the cry. Her pen stopped mid-note. "Your daughter-in-law? You're sure it was her?" My throat closed. "I know what I saw." She nodded grimly and stepped away to make a call. Through the glass, I watched a doctor lower his head over the incubator. My heart stilled. Then, a movement. A nurse lifted the baby's hand, and his fingers twitched, just once. It was the smallest motion, barely there. But in that sterile room filled with machines and fear, it felt like a miracle, the fragile breath between one heartbeat and the next. 3 days passed in a blur of antiseptic air and sleepless nights. The hospital became a second home, a waiting room chair my bed, coffee my blood. The baby, still nameless, lay in the NICU under a web of wires and soft beeping monitors. Every rise of his tiny chest was a miracle I didn't dare take for granted. Detective Ava Morales came often, her questions calm but cutting. "You're sure it was your daughter-in-law? Sloane Harper?" she'd ask, and every time I'd nod. But doubt kept scratching at me. Why? Why would Sloane do this? Why a suitcase? Why my lake? On the 4th morning, Ava arrived with a man in a gray suit. His hands clutched a folder, the kind that carried truths you weren't ready for. "Mrs. Bennett," Ava said gently, "we ran a DNA analysis. We needed to know who this child belongs to." My throat went dry. "And?" The man opened the folder, slid a few sheets across the table. "The test is conclusive," he said. "The baby's genetic markers match your late son, Marcus Bennett. There's a 99.98% probability he's the father." The words didn't land at first. They floated in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp. My brain refused to make sense of them. Marcus had been gone for 8 months. I'd buried him myself, watched the casket lower into the ground, heard the thud of earth against the lid. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Marcus didn't. There was no pregnancy, no mention." Ava's voice softened. "The baby was born 3 days before you found him. It's likely Sloane concealed the pregnancy." My knees gave out, and I sank into the chair. The room blurred. All I could see was Marcus's smile, the one he wore when he first brought Sloane home. Proud, naive, full of trust. How much did he really know about her? A faint cry drifted from the NICU, thin but real. I pressed my palm against the glass, watching the tiny figure wrapped in wires and hope. He was Marcus's child, the last piece of him left in this world. Tears blurred my reflection as I whispered, "Whose child are you, little one? And what did your mother do to deserve you?" The house had grown unbearably quiet. Even the clock on the mantel seemed hesitant to tick. Since Ava's revelation, every corner felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories that refused to rest. Marcus's laughter still clung to the walls, faint and fleeting. That evening, I wandered into his old room for the first time in months. The air smelled faintly of cedar and engine oil, Marcus's scent, frozen in time. His desk sat untouched, a thin layer of dust softening the edges of his life. I ran my fingers across the surface until they caught on the brass latch of a small wooden trunk. It creaked open. Inside were pieces of a life abruptly cut short, a broken wristwatch, a stack of photographs, and a leather-bound journal, corners worn, pages yellowed. My heart stuttered. Marcus had always been private. Finding his journal felt like intruding, and yet, I needed answers. The handwriting was slanted, hurried. I traced the ink as if it could bring him back. The first entries were simple. Notes about work, plans for the baby they'd hoped for, dreams of building a nursery. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. "Sloane's been distant lately," one entry read. Asterisk, "keep saying she's visiting her mother, but the calls don't match. Money's missing, a lot of it. She got defensive when I asked." Asterisk. My pulse quickened. Another entry. Asterisk, "Car made a strange noise today. Mechanic says nothing's wrong, but I swear she took it in last week without telling me." Asterisk. The words blurred through my tears. Marcus had been suspicious. He'd known something was wrong, and he hadn't told me. The final page was dated 3 days before his accident. The ink was smudged, rushed. Asterisk, "If something happens to me, tell Mom I love her. And tell her not to trust Sloane." Asterisk. The journal slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. I pressed my palms to my face, trembling. All this time, I'd believed it was just an accident. That fate had taken my son. But now, the truth whispered from between those pages. ugly, sharp, undeniable. I lifted my head, tears drying into resolve. "I'll find out what you meant, Marcus," I said into the silence. "Whatever it takes." Detective Ava Morales met me at the station 2 days later. The room was dim, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and burnt coffee. A single lamp flickered above the desk, casting long shadows across a stack of bank statements. "We pulled your son's financial records," Ava said, sliding the papers toward me. "I think you'll want to see this." I hesitated before touching them. Marcus had always been careful with money, meticulous, even. But the numbers on the page told another story. Large withdrawals, frequent transfers, thousands disappearing into an account under the name S. Harper Holdings. "That's Sloane's maiden name," I whispered. Ava nodded. "It's an offshore account based in Belize. Opened 2 months before the accident." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "So she was moving his money?" "Looks that way. But it gets worse." Ava flipped to another page. An insurance policy. Marcus had doubled his life insurance 3 weeks before he died. Sloane was the sole beneficiary. My stomach turned to ice. He trusted her. He thought he was protecting their future. Ava's jaw tightened. And she might have been planning his end. I couldn't breathe. The air felt too thick, the walls too close. For months, I'd told myself Marcus's crash was a tragic accident, a wet road, bad luck. But the journal, the money, the lies, they painted a darker truth. A knock at the door broke the silence. A uniformed officer stepped in. "Detective, the mechanic's here." Ava gestured for him to enter. The man looked uneasy, rubbing grease-stained hands on his coveralls. "You said this was about Marcus Bennett's car," he muttered. "Yeah, I remember it. His wife brought it in the week before the crash. Said the brakes were making noise." Ava leaned forward. "And were they?" He hesitated. "No, ma'am. Everything checked out fine." But she kept asking weird questions. Like what would happen if the brake fluid line was accidentally cut. I didn't think much of it then. The room went still. My pulse thundered in my ears. Ava met my eyes, her expression grim. "Mrs. Bennett, I don't think your son's death was an accident." The words hit like a physical blow. My hands trembled as I whispered. "Then my boy was murdered, and she thought no one would ever find out." Sloane answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The same smile she'd worn at Marcus's funeral. Polite, hollow, rehearsed. Her hair was perfectly styled, her lipstick precise, as if grief had never touched her. "Ellie," she said sweetly. "What a surprise. I wasn't expecting company." "I'm sure you weren't," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. "We need to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course. Come in." The house was immaculate, every surface shining, every photo frame positioned just so. Outside the window, Lake Juniper glimmered, calm, deceptive. I took a seat at the dining table while she poured 2 glasses of wine. My phone, already recording, lay hidden in my purse. "I heard about what you did," she began, settling across from me. "Saving that poor baby. Such a tragedy, isn't it? Who could abandon a child like that?" Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes flicked, sharp, assessing. "You tell me," I said quietly. Sloane froze for half a second, the glass trembling in her hand before she set it down. "Excuse me." I leaned forward. "You were there, Sloane. I saw you. You threw that suitcase into the lake." Her breath hitched, just once. Then she laughed, light and artificial. "That's absurd. Why would I do something so monstrous?" "That's what I want to know," I said. "Marcus wrote about you in his journal. The missing money. The lies. You think no one would ever read it?" Something in her face shifted, the mask slipping. Her smile tightened into a thin, cruel line. "Marcus was paranoid," she said. "He couldn't handle that I was smarter than him. He always had to be the hero." "He trusted you," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "He loved you." Sloane's expression softened, almost pitying. Love makes people blind, Ellie. You should know that better than anyone. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then she leaned closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. I'd stop digging if I were you, she whispered. You're not ready for what you'll find. Her hand brushed mine, cold, deliberate. You should have stayed out of it, Ellie. The words slid through me like ice, and I knew then, beneath that perfect smile, I was staring straight into the face of evil. The call came just after midnight. I'd been sitting in Marcus's old room, clutching his journal, when Ava's voice cut through the quiet. We found something, she said. You'd better come. 2 hours later, I was standing at the edge of a dirt road deep in the woods north of town. Police cars lined the path, their red and blue lights bleeding through the fog. A cold wind whispered through the pines as officers moved in and out of a small wooden cabin that looked forgotten by time. Ava met me at the gate, her breath visible in the cold. This is the address tied to Sloane's rental car receipts, she said. Neighbors thought it was abandoned. I followed her inside. The air smelled of smoke and rot. Flashlights swept across the room, revealing scattered items. An overturned chair, burned scraps of paper in a metal bin, a stained towel half buried under dust. In the corner sat a small cot. The sheet was streaked with dried blood. Beside it, a half-empty bottle of rubbing alcohol and a pair of dull scissors. I felt my stomach turn. She gave birth here, Ava said quietly. Alone. My throat tightened. And the baby. She must have kept him for a few days before Ava stopped, jaw clenching. Before she decided to get rid of him. One of the officers approached, holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a torn envelope, its corner scorched but still legible. The name S. Harper was written in neat cursive. She tried to burn everything, Ava said. But not well enough. I stared at the cot again, my hands shaking. The image of that blue blanket in the suitcase flashed through my mind. The same kind of fabric lay crumpled at the foot of the bed. A forensic tech stepped forward. Preliminary DNA on the blood and hair samples. It's a match. Sloane Harper. She's the mother. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of wind against the cabin walls filled the silence. Ava exhaled slowly, her expression hardening. That's all we need, she said. We have her. Outside, the dawn was beginning to break, pale light spilling through the trees. I stared at the cabin, the cradle of her lies, and whispered, Then let justice finally wake. The boathouse smelled of damp wood and gasoline, the same one where Marcus used to fix his fishing boat on Sunday mornings. Now it was quiet, hollow, waiting. The lake outside was calm, almost mocking. Ava's team was hidden nearby, their microphones live. I could feel the weight of the tiny recorder clipped under my sweater, its red light blinking faintly. My palms were slick with sweat. Then I heard her. Sloane's heels clicked against the wooden planks, sharp and confident. She stepped inside wearing that same perfect smile, the one she wore at every funeral and lie. Ellie, she said softly. I was surprised you wanted to meet. After everything. I forced myself to meet her eyes. There's still one thing I don't understand, I said. Why? Why Marcus? Why the baby? Her smile faltered, then curled into something cruel. You already know why. Marcus wasn't supposed to find out. He always thought I was spending too much, asking too many questions. He didn't understand ambition. Ambition. I repeated, my voice barely steady. Sloane's laugh was low, bitter. The insurance policy was his idea. I just accelerated the payout. $200,000. Do you have any idea what that kind of freedom feels like? The world tilted. You murdered my son. She tilted her head, as if considering it. I prefer outgrew. Marcus was a phase, like the baby. I gave birth alone, in that miserable cabin, and when he started crying, I realized I couldn't do it. I didn't want reminders. I wanted to live. Every word was a knife, each one cutting deeper. My chest burned, but I stayed still, Ava's words echoing in my mind. Keep her talking. You left your own child to die, I whispered. Sloane smiled again, cold, gleaming. Don't pretend you wouldn't have done the same for a second chance. That's when the door burst open. Officers flooded the boathouse, their shouts breaking the stillness. Sloane's expression froze as Ava stepped forward, badge glinting. Sloane Harper, she said, voice firm. You're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Bennett and the attempted murder of your child. The cuffs clicked shut. Sloane's calm shattered. She screamed, thrashing as they dragged her toward the door. I didn't move. I just watched, silent, trembling, as tears slipped down my face, falling onto the old wooden floor where Marcus once stood alive. The world moved slower after Sloane's arrest, as if time itself was catching its breath. The news ran the story for days. Mother-in-law uncovers truth behind son's murder. I didn't read a single article. The headlines didn't matter. All that mattered was the baby. Marcus's baby. Weeks passed before the hospital finally called. He's ready for visitors, the nurse said gently. My knees almost gave out. I'd prayed for this moment every night, to see him, to hold him without fear that he might slip away like everything else I loved. The NICU was quiet, filled with the soft hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Warm sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting golden lines across the sterile walls. In the middle of it all lay the smallest person I had ever loved. He was stronger now, his cheeks a little fuller, his breathing steady. When the nurse lifted him from the incubator and placed him in my arms, I felt something inside me break and heal all at once. Hello, sweetheart, I whispered, brushing a finger along his tiny hand. You've been through so much. His skin was warm, his heartbeat faint but sure against my chest. I thought of Marcus then, his laugh, his stubborn kindness, the way he'd rest a hand on my shoulder when words weren't enough. I felt him here, in this tiny heartbeat, as if life had found a way to return what death had taken. The nurse smiled. He still doesn't have a name, she said softly. I looked down at him. Noah, I said. It means rest after the storm. My throat tightened. Noah Marcus Bennett. The words felt right, like a promise. For a long while, I just held him, breathing in his quiet strength. I could have hated his mother forever, and maybe a part of me always would, but hatred was a weight I was ready to lay down. This child deserved light, not shadows. As if understanding, Noah stirred in my arms. His tiny fingers reached out and wrapped around mine. Small, perfect, determined. The tears came without warning, warm and unashamed. Welcome home, my love, I whispered. Welcome back to the world. A full year had passed since that morning by the lake, the day my world cracked open and began to heal. Seasons had turned quietly, each one softening the edges of what once felt unbearable. The courthouse papers now rested in a neat folder on my kitchen table, the ink still fresh and official. Adoption finalized. He was mine now, in every way that mattered. Noah Marcus Bennett toddled across the living room, clutching a wooden toy in one hand and my heart in the other. His laughter filled the house that had long forgotten how to echo with joy. Every giggle, every wobbly step was a reminder that miracles weren't loud. Sometimes they came in small breaths and sticky fingers. That afternoon, I dressed him in a pale blue sweater and drove to Lake Juniper. The water was calm, glass-like under the warmth of spring sunlight. The same lake that had once stolen my peace now shimmered with gold and forgiveness. We sat on the weathered dock, the same spot where I'd once stood trembling with horror, clutching a half-dead baby. Noah leaned against me, chubby fingers gripping my sleeve as he babbled to the rippling waves. This is where I found you, I whispered, brushing his soft hair. Right here, where the world ended and began again. A dragonfly skimmed across the surface, catching the light like a flicker of hope. I told him stories then, of his father, Marcus, how he was kind and stubborn, how he loved fixing old engines and believed laughter could fix almost anything. Noah looked up at me with eyes so familiar it hurt. Marcus's eyes. He gurgled in response, as if understanding. I laughed through my tears. He would have loved you so much, little one. The sun sank lower, painting the lake in hues of amber and rose. A soft breeze brushed against my cheek, gentle as a blessing. I closed my eyes and let it pass through me. Grief, love, forgiveness, all woven into one quiet piece. When I opened them again, Noah was watching the water, smiling. I held him close and whispered, "The lake once took everything from me, but it gave me back my reason to live."